what everyone is wondering, if Ramaphosa gets a strong, victory, and a strong, having spoken to some ANC people, would be just over 60%, a strong mandate. They would be more than happy with 62%, for instance. It would give Cyril the mandate to bring about the reform that is desperately needed, and that reform would include dealing with the state-owned entities. It would mean the smaller bureaucracy, less ministries that cost much more money, and it would also mean a real reform agenda looking at the corruption issues. And I think for a lot of voters, they want to see arrests. They want those that were responsible of looting and stealing millions from Eskom, Transnet, and all other state-owned entities to actually be held accountable. And until that happens, people will just really feel disappointed. But that's on the one hand, that is bringing change in government. The other real change is, of course, within the ANC. Now, we just saw recently Ace Magashule and Jacob Zuma on the campaign trail as one big happy couple, as if nothing has happened, as if no corruption has happened. And you just constantly get this tension between Ace Magashule, who's effectively the person who runs Latuli House, who's effectively in charge of the list process of which MPs will be going to Parliament. And that doesn't, but people don't have faith that, Ramaphosa is really in charge of the ANC. And then, in the run up to this election, the rumor mill was in overdrive, saying that, even if Ramaphosa gets a mandate, there's the 2020 National General Council, and that's when they will vote out Cyril Ramaphosa, and the Ace Magashule crowd will take over. And don't forget, David Mabuza is he's the number 2 and the deputy president, and who can forget what he did in Mpumalanga. So it's also that kind of scare stories that are out in the public domain about, what will Cyril really be able to do in terms of his reform agenda within the ANC, because ultimately you get these mixed messages all the time. For instance, recently, Ace Magashule alluded to the fact that his phones are being bugged and, state machinery is being used to listen into his conversation. Cyril Ramaphosa went, at a public event saying this is not true. And so you constantly have this conflicting messages coming from, the two ANCs, as some would define it. And recently speaking to Kosatu, and they were also saying, look, there is no one ANC. There is an ANC that is still fighting to, the corrupt ANC versus the one that wants to clean up. And that's ultimately still at play within the ANC. And, giving Ramaphosa a stronger mandate would mean, hopefully, that he will be able to bring about that reform agenda that's so desperately needed.
I mean, one of the things that does appear to be happening is his tactic of very slowly but surely getting his arms around the national prosecuting authority. That process does appear to be happening. He got rid of these 2 deputies from the NPA, Jiba and Ribi. He's put, his woman in charge of the National Prosecuting Authority now. He's, a lot of people were skeptical about these commissions that he got going, thinking that it was just kicking problems into the long grass. But he does appear to be, he got rid of the boss of the tax authority, Tom Moyane. He's investigating the intelligence people. So there does seem to be something happening now. We saw the Bosasa stuff. The investment into the Public Investment Corporation is coming too. But is this the kind of thing that the ANC watchers and the political anoraks of the world will notice, or is it stuff which has captured the public imagination? Does South Africa's public think, oh, okay, there is some fruit being born out of this anti-corruption drive?
I think there's definitely, I mean, not a week goes by or a day goes by when there's not a new revelation. So, for instance, now this week, the election week, we're now hearing the latest of how Transnet was also captured by certain individuals and the role players and some of the corruption that had happened. Recently, there was also a special probe into some prosecutors, and again, we heard the extent of the colluding and how certain, justice officials were captured. And so, what South Africans now want, they say, yes, thank you for all the Commission of Inquiries. It's given us all the meat and details of what actually happened. But can we now see a prosecution? Can we please see someone going to jail? And I think that is what the
Yeah.
public wants to see. And so, for instance, the new South African Revenue Services boss took over on the 1st of May. A few days later, we immediately heard SARS is going to start investigating those that had gained money from the state capture process. The names that we've heard from the State Capture Commission, for instance, the Bosasa case, all those ministers that allegedly received money, SARS is going to go for that extra money and people will have to pay up. And so the public wants to see that kind of action. They want to hear someone is paying back the money in some way or the other. There
Yeah.
has to be arrests. And that, many ordinary people that I speak to on a daily basis, that is what they want to see. One, they are happy that there's the end, or, we've seen the end of that corruption happening, but they now also want to see action. And we've heard Cyril Ramaphosa speaking at the final rally in Gauteng, promising that there's going to be action, um, of those, and he's going to act against corruption. And so people want to see that. So we don't know if we are simply hearing that now because it's 2 days before the vote, or because it's the election, and that's what people want to hear. But people, they really want to see those that have been stealing from the cookie jar to be exposed and be sent to jail.
It is obviously far too early in the process to be talking about new ministers, but knowing the political rumor mill, I'm sure there are names being bandied about. Who looks like they might be included in the next government?
Well, I think firstly, we're going to see a smaller, leaner government. We're going to see ministries being merged. Already we have communications and, that ministry or with telecoms, etc., being merged. So there's going to be further mergers. I think, for instance, some people are wondering why we should have a small business development department and an economic development and a trade and industry. And so those are three ministries costing a lot of money. And so it's those kind of things that we will see merging, in terms of, do we still need a special ministry for women affairs? Should it not be merged with social development, for instance? And so I think firstly, we're going to see a merging of ministries and we're going to see a smaller, leaner cabinet. I think so far we definitely can see that, Ramaphosa's close allies that's been with him on the campaign trail that, have been supporting him since day one, like people like Aaron Motsoaledi, Derek Hanekom. We are going to see them again, but there might be people that won't be coming back. For instance, when we had asked Rob Davis, very successful trade and industry minister, will he be coming back? And he was like, well, we'll have to wait and see. He's not willing to comment on it. So we definitely know what's going to happen to Batapile Dlamini, Nomvula Mokonyana, all those ministers that whose hands were caught in the cookie jar. What's going to happen to them? But if we look at the list in terms of the ANC parliamentary list, those are exactly the people that are on top of the list, like Malusi Kigaba, like Nomvula Mokonyana, like Patapila Dlamini. Those are the people that are on top of the list. And if you look at ANC processes, because ultimately South Africans are not voting just for Cyril Ramaphosa, they're also voting for Ace Magashule, Patapila Dlamini, Nomvula Mokonyane, because we have the proportional representation electoral system here. So we vote for the party, and ultimately it's the party that decides which which people or person will be coming to Parliament. And so that's the real.
So Ramaphosa may not have the leeway that, people think that he has to, impose new faces in the cabinet.
Exactly. He can appoint 2 people from outside. So who knows? He might bring in Maria Ramos as an outsider, because we also know, for instance, that Tito Mboweni, he has no inclination to come back to running a government department. He's quite happy having his board positions at Goldman and other institutions, comfortable in those board positions, and he feels that's where he can have input. And so who knows, Cyril can bring 2 people from outside, and that's his prerogative.
Well, I'm very curious to hear how this all panned out.
Oh, yes. No, I mean, it's like, even just here in the Western Cape, it's like, what's going to happen? And the DA is sweating. You must see all the ads. Like every minute, Nick, on every radio, there's like an ad, stop ANC. Now they're on the whole crime, that the ANC is not doing enough. So it's like serious overdrive at the moment. Then there's like, we haven't, touched much on KZN. What's going to happen with the IFP? Are they going to make inroads? What's the Zuma effect? But, all eyes on sort of Gauteng, Western Cape, because these are the historical provinces, that the ANC has been in charge, the DA has been in charge. So, so we kind of like, just like what's going to happen, But they're only announcing the final result on Saturday afternoon. But we'll already know by Friday what's gonna.
A lot of speculation, I imagine, between now and then.
Absolutely, But I think we first need to get the election cracking, get everyone to vote, no drama, and then we'll see,
Thanks to Crystal there in Cape Town. We'll catch up again with her soon. You can find her on Twitter at Crystal Orderson. I'm at Nick Norbrook, and you can join the conversation at the Africa Report. Do check us out on Facebook too. Please do rate the podcast if you have a moment. It really helps others to find the show. We appreciate it. So that's all for this week. Thanks for listening.